Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I am here with Farheen Khan, who was the first place for the Dreamer Doer Award this year, alhamdulillah, which was held in honor of International Women's Month. And I'm so excited to be sharing the work that she's done and a little bit more insight from her because I hadn't heard about you previously, Farheen, but you're definitely doing a lot, alhamdulillah. And this was a big reason why these awards were created, just because there's so many women doing so many things. And while your work is very widely known, especially in your community and I believe online as well, of course, there's so many people in the world that still, might not know. So inshallah, the vision is to, share the awesome things and spread. I know you're very big on not just your own success, but the success of other women. So I'm excited to, for everyone to hear from you, inshallah. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? There's so much I could share about you. You're very accomplished, mashallah. But I'm going to let you share what you feel, is most meaningful to you at this point in your life, inshallah.
Okay, great. Well, Jazakallah khair for the opportunity to speak with you today. I guess I can start by saying that, I'm a Muslim Canadian born hijabi woman. I am an author of two books, alhamdulillah, and I've been a community advocate and organizer for many years. And most recently, I'm running in the upcoming federal election as a candidate for the NDP in the riding of Mississauga Centre.
Alhamdulillah, that is all very awesome. And yes, I was catching up on some of your, I think there was a video, I don't know if it was on your channel or not, but where you kind of shared some of your vision for Mississauga. So that was very enlightening, alhamdulillah. What does, being that you do so much and you're involved in so many different things, what does a day typically look like for you? And does that vary during Ramadan? Are days typically the same, or do they, change on a day-to-day basis? Tell us a little bit about that, inshallah, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my day usually right now, because I'm running for the election, I mean, my day is pretty much spent at meeting people at the doors, being able to really engage with people and really talk about what the concerns are as it relates to them in their everyday living. But obviously, for me as well, I mean, one of the things that people know is that I've lost a lot of weight. So, a good workout is always very important. It's something I do every day. I also, feel it's important to balance your life. So I'm always making sure that, I've got my house in order and I've got my meals scheduled as well. So that's always really helpful. But beyond that, it's that would look like, that's basically what my day looks like. I do a lot of work outside. I am also a fundraising consultant. So I support local charities and help them gain some sustainable funding. So when I do have time outside of my campaign, that's sort of usually what I'm doing. And as far as Ramadan goes, I mean, certainly, everything's continuing even during Ramadan. Some people have actually said to me at the doors that they're very impressed and very happy that I'm working so hard during Ramadan. But the work continues. It's important for me to do this work, and so that's why I do it. The only thing is, I know everybody's sort of struggling with getting enough sleep, and so that's something I'm struggling with a little as well. But alhamdulillah, we're almost 2 weeks in now, so it's getting better.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for sharing that. And yeah, I know that I did read, I think the sister who initially nominated you, shared about your weight loss goals, and I was very impressed with that, alhamdulillah. And, as someone who could, relate, probably several, many years ago now, I lost a good amount of weight myself, about 40 pounds, but I know for you it was like 200, am I correct?
Almost 175.
Alhamdulillah, well, yes, yeah, subhanAllah, but yeah, that's very determined, but it's awesome. I love how you use the word balanced in terms of keeping, everything balanced, which isn't easy in such a, busy world and whatnot, but thank you for sharing that with us. And it's great inspiration as well for people who may not think that it's possible to, keep on going during Ramadan, because of course, there's more blessings in Ramadan, and obviously we don't just fast, so we could just do nothing, alhamdulillah. So that's awesome to hear. I was really touched to hear about your work. I know you were, I believe, a development manager at a women's shelter. Could you tell us a little bit about that, the experiences you saw, your days there?
Sure, sure. So yes, I was a development manager at a women's shelter locally here. It was a mainstream shelter. It was definitely a very humbling experience. I mean, being able to see, I spent almost 4 years there, and seeing the kind of women that came through the doors. I mean, they're not different than people like you and me. We realize that. In Canada, the statistics are 1 in 3 women will experience some form of violence in their lifetime, and that's something to be, that's something to be said about that, and the fact that it's so much closer to home than we sometimes realize. And so, seeing the women and the kind of pain that they have to go through, but also what's really inspiring about seeing the shelter was that the fact that it takes so much courage for these women to take a step out of their difficult abusive relationships, to be able to recognize that they deserve better, and that this is not acceptable behavior. Yeah, so it's definitely something that crosses all boundaries. I mean, I was there as a development manager, and so my job really was to ensure that I could educate as many people as possible about the impact of violence on women's lives, and then how, on the other hand, people who had resources were able to support the cause that we were working on.
Awesome. Yeah, I love how you mentioned how, they're not that much different than you and I. I think sometimes people, and I guess it's hard if someone's not, we all have a different walk of life and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, anyone could find themselves in that situation for sure. And I love also how you attached courage to those women, because obviously that's, a choice and not an easy one for sure. So thank you for sharing that. Can you share? I know I got a sneak peek of this, and your visions are definitely awesome. I got the sneak peek from that video I mentioned, but can you share your political view for Canada, and I guess, more specifically for Mississauga, what you kind of, see, what you kind of hope for that community?
Sure. So, one of the things, well, there's a couple of things that we really want to make, change in Mississauga, but also across Canada, right? So, we really are talking about making life more affordable for people. One part of my story personally is that I grew up in subsidized housing. I was born and raised in Mississauga, and we had, there were times when it was difficult for us to live. We come from a big family. We have a family of 9, and so I started working really young, and so yeah, poverty was definitely a piece of my life, and it was one of those things that really drove me to say, you know what, this is something that I don't want to have my family have to struggle with again, but also I want to be able to end that for other people as well, which is why I kind of got into the not-for-profit sector to begin with, and worked with charities like the United Way and others. But the other thing is, so we're looking at making life more affordable for, for the middle class, or for everyday people like you and I, but also we're looking at trying to, improve the economy. I mean, the economy is failing. Unfortunately, a lot of people are living, struggling to make ends meet, but also, working in precarious jobs, or they're unemployed. So being able to create new jobs is also very important to us. And then the third thing is that, being able to restore Canada on the global stage, but also restore, fairness, peace and justice within Canada as well. So we know that there's a lot happening right now with this current government around, taking away people's civil rights in the name of security and safety, and that's a big concern that we're also working to change. And so that's really why I'm running, to be able to make those changes, both in Mississauga, but also across Canada.
Awesome. Jazakallah khair for that. And your insight is really awesome as well. And it's interesting to see how, some things are, very similar to things here in the US as well. Could you share, you mentioned how some civil rights aren't really being given the way. Could you give some examples just for those who aren't familiar with Canada, or, just for some more insight?
Sure. So C-51 is the bill that we've been talking about here in Canada. It's something that's very concerning, not just to Muslims, but also across Canada. Part of what's happening is that it's a bill which basically gives enforcement a lot more what they call superpowers with very little oversight. We've already
Mhm.
seen how that oversight, the lack of oversight, before even giving these powers, have affected people's lives and how people have been targeted and picked up without cause. So there's concerns around that. But also, the the bill is actually called the anti-terrorism bill, but unfortunately, it the way in which the government's using that bill, they are basically taking away people's privacy altogether. You will be monitored, and people can be charged for posting things on their social media. That anything that would be considered a threat to national security. And unfortunately, the terminology or the definition of what that means is anything anti-government. So, environmentalists, human rights advocates, we're talking about First Nations, Aboriginal peoples. We're talking about, groups like, the Muslims or any other, ethnic or racial group. Anybody basically that they deem is a threat to national security, which is really concerning. I mean, there's also other things where what they call CSIS, or our security agencies are able to take a warrant out that basically would prevent. They would be able to arrest people without cause, just to be able to say that this person may commit a crime in the future. So some of these things are very concerning to a lot of Canadians, and so that's one of the big issues around security and safety that the party that I represent, NDP, has always been consistently opposed to, but also is very much committed to repealing it as soon as we form government.
Yeah, that's some awesome insight, and I definitely think obviously some of those things are specific to Canada, but I know some things, like I said before, could definitely relate to some policies and bills and whatnot here in the U.S. as well, and I'm sure in other places. So that's it's great to see people who are passionate about that. Alhamdulillah. And yeah, this award was called the Dreamer Doer Award because a lot of times people have great ideas. I'm sure there are people that, I mean, what average person would, necessarily like something like that, being that it infringes on their safety, their rights, and whatnot. But you're here because you're not just dreaming, but you're doing in many areas, alhamdulillah. So that is great to hear.
Thank you.
So I know you also wrote two books. Could you tell us a little bit about them in terms of, what they're about, what inspired you to write them, and yeah, anything else you want to share regarding that?
Okay, sure. So the first one was called The Hijabi's Journey to Happiness. It was called, well, From Behind the Veil, A Hijabi's Journey to Happiness. And part of what that book is about my life story, very much about how I was born and raised in Canada, and how I chose to wear the hijab at a very young age, the kind of discrimination that I had faced, or Islamophobia, if you want to use that word, and then sort of my struggle to get into the workforce, but also then what happened after 9/11. So I had experienced backlash, a pretty intense backlash, was attacked by somebody, and that was very much gendered Islamophobia. So I talk about that because I want people to understand that Islamophobia, while, unfortunately, the media continues to create this fear of Muslims in society. The reality is that there's also an impact of that Islamophobia on people's lives. So I wanted to be very clear about that and say, my entire journey of healing and my work, and the reason why I ended up in a social justice, in doing social justice work, is because of my experiences post 9/11. So that's my first book. And then the second one is more recent. It was released in 2014, and that one's called A Hijabi's Journey to Live, Laugh, and Love. And the reason I wrote that book was actually because I was it's a little more personal in that it's my story, but more about my relationships. And so, having growing up as a Muslim, but also as a South Asian woman, there's certain expectations that I was, that I had, or my family had of me, or society had of me, of, being married and having children and all of that. So, I chose to do that, and I got into an arranged marriage, which was someone that my family introduced me to. Unfortunately, within a couple of weeks, I realized that he had done it for immigration, and it was a really tough experience to have to go through, And anyway, after coming out of that, I really had to take a step back and reflect on why it was that I had gotten into that relationship to begin with, and part of it was because I was so I didn't value myself in that way. I was almost 400 pounds, didn't look at myself. While I was very high, while I've always been sort of a public figure, for myself personally, it wasn't something that I didn't see myself in that way. And so I struggled with my self-esteem and self-confidence. And so I made a commitment to myself that, what, if the only, if in order for me to be in a good, healthy relationship, I need to love myself and take care of myself, then that's what I'm going to do. And so I started Project Farheen is what I call it. And I set some goals for myself and decided, what, even if I'm going to the gym for 5 minutes to walk on a treadmill, which literally is what I used to do in the beginning, it's still worth it, because at the end of the day, it's an investment in myself. And so that's the reason why I wrote that book, and thought, what, there's a lot of different themes in there, but particularly around violence or abuse, and relationships and women's heartaches, but also the importance of loving yourself and actually caring for yourself, and recognizing that, we're not all perfect, but we're a work in progress. And that's just how I think it's so important for women to recognize that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being so brave and sharing those things, both here and obviously in your books as well. And, anyone listening, I definitely recommend for you to check them out, and I'll be checking them out deeper myself, inshallah. And yeah, I think that's, the idea of self-worth and valuing ourselves as women is such a big thing, especially when it comes to family pressures, cultural norms, things like that. So I really admire you, sharing your story, because I'm sure that it will help, inshallah, someone, who might also fall into something like that or whatnot. But obviously, all of our life experiences, they come for a reason, and they make us the people that we are. But that's really awesome that you share that. Because some people might just keep it to themselves. But again, subhanAllah, that's you being a doer and whatnot. And, in my work, I work with a lot of women one-on-one, and also in group settings and whatnot. And it's something, I know it's something, years ago I had to do a lot of work on myself in regards to that, but that I see a lot in terms of women making decisions that aren't really their decisions. So it's kind of like you have to pause and think, like, okay, why am I doing this? So I love that you share that. And yeah, that's awesome. And I also wanted to say the whole 5-minute thing is also awesome as well, because sometimes, whether it's exercise or whether it's embarking on a new project or passion, sometimes people just don't start because they think like, oh, I mean, unless I go to the gym for an hour, it's not worth anything. But in fact, it's all about starting. And one of my favorite quotes is that clarity comes from action. So I really love, you shared so many tidbits of wisdom there. Jazakallah khair. So we're gonna lighten it up a little bit, alhamdulillah. So do you have any hobbies that you like to do in your downtime, or sneak in between your busy schedule, just things that you enjoy to do?
You know what? I enjoy writing. I mean, one of the things I consistently do is write, journal. That's something I appreciate. I read as well. These days I'm doing a lot more political reading, but generally I enjoy reading. And then working out. It's one of the things that I've come to realize that I really enjoy. I do also, I have in the past, and shall continue to be running sessions for women, Muslim women particularly, under the name of Aziza. And what that is basically running like half an hour to 45-minute workout sessions with women. It's really more of a support group, to be honest, than it is a fitness program. Women come and get active and they enjoy themselves, but it's really just to be able to build a sense of community. So I enjoy doing that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are really awesome hobbies for sure. And yeah, a lot of times women, community is so important and support for women. So that is awesome. And, underneath where all the details are in this video when it's published, inshallah, we will have all of your links, inshallah, for people to check out.
Inshallah, that's great.
So, how about this? What's something, if anything, that you struggle with? Like you mentioned, no one is perfect, and we all struggle with things. And how do you manage it? I like to include this question just because sometimes someone might be like, "Oh, this person is so accomplished and this and that," and they might feel like, sometimes anyone who's in the public might be put on a pedestal. I'm sure you've experienced this before. And, it's awesome, I think, to sometimes share, even if they're little things we struggle with, because they inspire people to be like, okay, this is just another human being, but they don't allow their struggles to, I guess, stop them. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, so I think one of the big things I struggle with right now, which is very interesting, actually, I've been reflecting on it for a while, is the fact that when I was heavier, like much heavier, I didn't struggle as much with the way that I looked, to be honest. I just kind of accepted the fact that I was, heavy, I was big, and then, you would see my rolls in my clothes regardless. It didn't matter. But now, as I'm getting closer and closer to my goal, there are certain areas where my fat is going faster than other places. And so I've actually come to realize that, there are certain parts of my body that I don't necessarily like, or I'm very conscious of. And so, it's one of those things where I just need to recognize that, I'm still a work in progress. I'm still not where I want to be. Most people who see me now would probably never imagine that I was that heavy. So it's always a reminder for myself to say, you know what, it's okay if they don't see me as the way that I see myself, or the fact that they don't know what the journey was. But as long as I'm wearing, comfortable clothing, and I know that I feel confident in myself and in what I have accomplished and how far I've come, then I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair for sharing that as well. And, just being really real and honest, and that just makes it such a better interview. And yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of, it's interesting how body image issues more so came up for you, even after you lost so much weight. And that's not uncommon for sure. But I love the way that you manage it, and, always remembering the journey is so important, because a lot of times I think the journey is, of course the goal is important. We have to have a goal to know what direction we're going towards, for sure, and to keep us focused, but the journey is so important as well. So thank you for sharing that. So how does being a Muslim woman influence your professional life? I'm sure, I know you shared a couple things as to it actually kind of inspiring you, certain experiences inspiring you to embark on certain things. But, just as a Muslim woman, in terms of your identity, things like that, how does it influence your professional life?
Well, certainly, now that I'm in politics, it's become quite the interesting. Well, there's a lot of interest for people. We're getting a lot of media exposure for sure. Just because I'm a hijab-wearing woman that's running federally, and if I'm elected, I'll be the first to be, elected into parliament who wears a hijab. So that would be a big deal. But also, it's something that I think is an opportunity. I've always worn the hijab as a way to. There's a story that I wrote in my book, but I could share that with you. So when I was before I decided to wear hijab, I was 9 years old, and I was sitting in a little gathering with my mom, and there was a bunch of Muslim women who would get together because there was no mosque at the time. It was a very small space that they would use. And I remember one of the aunties, actually, one of the women, we call them aunties, had said, she was reading some some sort of excerpt, and I don't even remember exactly which one it was, but I just remember knowing that, when she said it, she said, you know what, when you wear hijab, it's a commitment to God and, Allah, and one day, inshallah, when you go to paradise, Allah will come and thank you, and He'll thank you for your sacrifices. And so in the mind of in my mind, and at 9, I thought, oh my goodness, this is my chance to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, I'm going to do this, right? Like, that's it. Like, this is my opportunity. So I was really excited, went home, told my mom, I'm going to do this. My birthday was the next day, and so I said, okay, I'm going to go all out. I'm going to wear the hijab. I mean, I'm going to wear my, get my hair done, and I'm going to, wear my mom's best earrings and put on some makeup. And I dressed up, went to school, and it's like, this is my day to live it up. And, I went to class, and I did show and tell with my class and told them what I was going to do and why. And they were really supportive of that. And so that sort of began the journey. But of course, now that I'm older, now that I've been through a lot of experiences, now that I've seen the kind of backlash and have experienced it firsthand, I do it more for political reasons. And when I say that, I say it because I've always wanted to be able to counter the narrative in the media to say that, you know what, not all Muslims are bad, that there are some really great people in the world, and we're just like everybody else. We're all Canadians, we're all Americans, we're human beings, right? And we're trying to live the best way that we can. So that's what I've that's why I continue to wear it, and even in the public sphere, right? Like, I mean, my job is to continue to raise awareness, to be able to show people that I'm just as Canadian as anybody else is, and even even though I wear the hijab, it doesn't make me any less Canadian than anyone else.
Absolutely, and I had this huge smile. I know you can't see it when you were sharing your story as a 9-year-old. Yeah, it's so amazing how how kids think and whatnot. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that some people might be able to resonate with that on many levels, whether it's the spiritual level, the I guess more of the political level. And I love that you also are really passionate about taking back that narrative and showing people who we are. A lot of times, I think, especially post 9/11 and whatnot, Muslims are in a place to say, like, we are not this, we are not that. But I love that you were saying, hey, this is what I am. So that is awesome. So who and where do you seek inspiration from, Farheen? I know you said you love to read. So do you have, favorite sources of inspiration through that or through other means?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things I would tell you. And one is that, I like many people, I take inspiration from God and from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, I think that my path and my life journey has always been about standing up for justice and for human rights, and, just being able to be that voice of courage. And I believe that comes from Him. So the inspiration comes from Him. I'm just walking the path. That's really what I believe. But also, I mean, looking at, in small ways, I mean, there are a lot of people in my life who I've met over the years who, in some, small way, shape, or form, have influenced, my journey as well. One of those people is actually my father. And the reason I say that is because he, in a time in Mississauga, particularly where there was no mosque, he took it upon himself to have a vision of, wanting to create the space of an opportunity, a place for worship, really. And so I remember, being very young when he decided to take on that vision, and he lived, breathed that vision for a number of years, and I'll never forget, even now, like, the look on his face when he got the keys to the building and we walked in, right? Like, there was this twinkle in his eye, and I just remember, being at age 7 or 8 and just saying, you know what, wow, like, I realized very young that if you work hard, you've got a great vision, and you can share that vision in a way that it resonates with other people, then anything is possible, right? And so that's really what I think is very inspiring to me.
That's a really beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing everything that you're sharing. I know I keep saying that, but you're sharing so many awesome things, and alhamdulillah, awesome to see that dreaming and doing runs in the family, although I'm not shocked. So, So, is there any specific ayah or story from the Quran that has had any sort of profound impact on your life? And if so, why? And if not, is there just, a story or an ayah that just, means something to you or that sticks out to you?
You know what? I definitely. I mean, like, there's a particular ayat that I do resonate with a lot, and that's the Surah Al-Asr, right? So it's a very simple surah, but it really, I believe, encompasses everything that we believe in, and I definitely try to live my life in that way. And just to say that, and talk about the fact that you continue to do good deeds and be righteous, and stand for the truth. You're in law, like we those are things that require patience, and that support when you're doing the right thing comes from Allah. So that's something that I find very inspiring, and it's one of the things that I definitely keep in my mind as I continue on whatever journey I'm taking during my life.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's such that surah is such a good reminder too of just optimizing our time and not letting time pass us by. So that's really awesome.
Mhm.
So, are there any pieces of advice you'd give someone who wants to leave their mark on this world? I mean, I know there's so many people, who might be dreaming, but maybe something's holding them back from doing. What kind of advice would you give someone like that?
I would say that one of the things I've come to learn is that everybody on this, on everyone comes to the world with a purpose, right? And it's, alhamdulillah, I'm very fortunate that I've learned what my purpose is. And now I'm able to walk down that path. Sometimes people will go through their entire lives not really knowing what that purpose is. And so I think it's really important for people to actually reflect and really think about what it is that, they're passionate about, and why. Because everybody who, I know, at least in my experience, has decided to do work, whether it's around social justice or making change in the world, it's very much, it stems from their own personal experiences and in some way how they were affected by that issue or that particular event. And so I think it's very important for people to reflect on, okay, what does my life look like? Where do I live now? What have I gone through in the past? What am I passionate about? And then how can I use my learnings, my experiences, to be able to influence and make change on that particular issue that is important to me. I know that's a little vague and a bit broad, but I really think it's about self-reflection and then, really and truly trying to recognize what it is that um, you want to work towards. And that anything and everything is possible, right? Like the only limitations that we have are the ones that we create for ourselves. We really are able to do anything and everything. Yeah, there's, I often say that, I've experienced Islamophobia. We go through discrimination. Absolutely. There's more barriers that we may experience in society, but that should never prevent us from doing the right thing and for standing up for what we believe in, whatever that is to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that that's great advice, Jazakallah khair, especially because sometimes, you mentioned like it might be more vague or whatnot, but I think it really helps someone kind of tune in and realize that, there's a story within them, there's a purpose within them, whatever that may be, rather than looking, sometimes I guess it's common for people to kind of look at what others are doing and get kind of faded by like, oh, maybe I should be doing this, maybe I should be doing that, versus really trying to tune in. And like you said, I'm a firm believer of that as well, that anything is possible by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously that, each of us has special talents, special gifts, that come from him. So thank you for sharing that. Do you have any closing thoughts, anything that you'd just like to share that might not have been touched upon in any of the questions?
No, I just think that what you're doing is fantastic, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences and my story. And thank you so much to the sister who nominated me, and to all the support of all the sisters that are listening, or anybody really that's listening to this. I do hope that, in some little way I've been able to make a difference in your life, or I've inspired you to take action and do something to better your own life and hopefully those around you.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair for the beautiful words, and I'll have to send you privately, inshallah, the information of who nominated you. You might know her, you might not know her. I'm not sure, alhamdulillah, but yeah, I know she had some great things. There were so many awesome women who were nominated, but she had some great things to share about you. And I know also when I was reviewing, all the different judges, we had different judges who were, all doing their own awesome projects and whatnot, and their information will be listed when this interview is edited, inshallah. I think maybe 90% of them all had you as the number one spot, alhamdulillah. So I guess your story really resonated and stuck out, even amongst so many other awesome women. And yeah, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for being here. And, for those of you listening, I do pray that you use this as a source of inspiration, inshallah. And thank you so much for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu.